You see climate change on the news constantly, but do you understand that it's deciding who lives where? And the people who end up paying the price are almost always the same communities that have been pushed aside for generations. That process has a name: climate gentrification. Climate gentrification happens when climate impacts such as storms, flooding, fires, and heat change the value of land. Property values shift, the cost of living rises, and the people who've lived in these neighborhoods for decades get pushed out. Sometimes this will start with a disaster, such as a hurricane hitting, in which homes are destroyed, property values drop, and developers swoop in to buy cheap land. Low-income residents are not able to come back due to risen property values after the developers. Other times, it's the opposite. Wealthier families move into lower-income neighborhoods because they're safer from flooding or fires. Prices in those areas rise, and long-term residents aren't able to keep up. And the people being displaced are overwhelmingly low-income minority communities, pushed out by wealthier buyers and developers, most of whom are white. There are three types of climate gentrification. The first one is known as high-ground gentrification. As sea levels rise, higher elevation areas become more desirable. Wealthier residents move inland, and those communities living there get priced out. The second kind is resilience gentrification. Cities invest in climate adaptations such as seawalls, drainage systems, or green infrastructure. Those improvements raise property values, and the people who are supposed to benefit from the protection can no longer afford to stay in those areas. The third kind of gentrification is climate risk gentrification. Safer areas become more valuable simply because they're safer. Low-income residents get pushed into riskier areas, which is the areas most vulnerable to climate impacts. This isn't something that we may see in the future, though. This is something we're already seeing today. For example, in Miami, wealth is moving inland. Developers are buying up cheaper, high-elevation land in the same neighborhoods working-class families have lived in for decades. As investment pours in, those families are pushed out into riskier areas. Secondly, in New York City, after Hurricane Sandy hit Red Hook, a working-class neighborhood, developers bought damaged properties at low prices and built for wealthier buyers. The people who lived there before the storm couldn't afford to return. Finally, in New Orleans, we see the same pattern. As flood risk increases, wealth is shifting inland. Over the last 19 years, the black population in those inland neighborhoods has dropped by 33%. This is not simply a coincidence, but it's a climate pressure that is completely reshaping the city. Now we'll go ahead and discuss how climate gentrification actually works. The first method is through insurance. Insurance companies are beginning to pull out of high-risk areas or raising rates to the point where families are no longer able to afford coverage. For example, State Farm has stopped issuing new homeowner policies in California due to the wildfire risk. Other companies are excluding floods, fires, or wind damage entirely from their plans. Wealthier residents are able to move into places with cheaper insurance. Low-income residents cannot. Another way is through housing markets. According to Realtor.com, homes in Tampa and Miami appreciate faster in areas with lower flood risk. About 30% of homebuyers have changed where they search because of insurance challenges. And the people with the flexibility to move and money to choose safer areas are wealthier buyers. Then we have heat islands, which are places that cities have covered in pavement and concrete, which traps heat. These heat islands drive up AC costs, and families who can't afford higher utility bills get priced out of the area. Finally, lenders often refuse loans in high-risk areas or require massive down payments. Low-income buyers don't have that kind of upfront cash, so they're locked out of safer neighborhoods entirely. Now we are going to look at some areas that demonstrate how serious this really is. Miami's sea level is predicted to rise 10 to 17 inches by 2040. Flood insurance premiums have jumped 6% for private policies and 26% for federal ones in the last year. And when you zoom out, 74% of black communities live in nature-deprived areas, compared to only 23% of white Americans. That is not random. It's the result of decades of displacement, and climate change is only beginning to accelerate it. There is hope, though. The first thing we're able to do is to protect residents from displacement through legislation that keeps housing affordable in climate-safe areas. Secondly, we are able to hold corporations accountable when they move into vulnerable neighborhoods and raise prices without paying fair wages. Finally, by planning infrastructure with climate change in mind, communities will not be forced to move out after every disaster or adaptation project. These are not quick fixes, but they are necessary ones in the long term. In conclusion, climate gentrification isn't just about raising sea levels or stronger storms. It's about people losing their homes, communities, and their history. And unless governments and corporations are held accountable for the consequences of their decisions, the people with the least power will continue to pay the highest price.